Watch them pouring in.
Hello to those of you joining us this morning. Thank you for being here. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes.
Great to have everyone. It's a really nice day where we are. I'm curious where everybody's calling in from. If you could let us know in the chat where you're calling in from so we know you can hear us and see us okay, that'd be great. Molly from Wichita, great. Glad you're here. We are.
Hi, Ken. Glad you could join us this morning. Tracy from Southern California.
Oh, calling from Rome today, Carol. Well, great. Thank you. Dallas, Las Vegas, from all over. Welcome, everyone. If you're just logging in now, great to have you. Thank you for logging in, and let us know where you're calling in from in the chat. That'd be great. Whoops, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Hutchinson, Kansas, Minnesota. Hi, May.
All right.
Others here from Newton, right here in Kansas, from Wichita, Kansas. Great to have so many people from all over the country and all over the world. Somebody based in Spain.
Yes. Hello, Sarah. Just as a note, when you're in chat, thank you for putting your information in there. That's great. If you want to make sure that others can see your information as well, please select the all panelists and attendees in the to section there on the chat, because some are coming just to us, which is fine, but I know sometimes you want to share some information with others. That's fine too. Looks like we're about ready to go, huh?
Okay. I see some names that I saw here last week. Thank you for joining us again this week. We really appreciate you return visitors. It's great to have you. And those of you that are just joining us, please feel free to type in the chat where you're coming from, and we are going to get started here. Like I said, thank you all so much for being here. We want to welcome you to the next Leadership Capability webinar. Thank you for spending the next 30 minutes with us, and we hope that we can provide some tips for you for being better leaders. Hi, Patricia from Oregon. Thanks for being here. My name is Julie Regier from Next Element, and I will be co-hosting the webinar this morning. And a couple things that I want to share before we get started. If you have any questions as we go along here during the webinar, please feel free anytime during the webinar to type your question into the chat. I'll be monitoring that during the webinar, and we'll get questions over to Erin, and we'll get those answered for you either during the webinar or at the end. We usually have a few minutes. We take a few minutes at the end to have a Q&A. So if we don't cover the answer to your question during the webinar, we'll try to get to it there at the end. The Next Element Leadership Capability webinars are a weekly series of 30-minute free webinars. These were designed to focus on a specific problem that leaders regularly encounter in the workplace. And we want to provide behavioral solutions that can be immediately applied. We created these webinars based on our work with clients from around the world in both large and small organizations in a variety of industries. If you're a leader who regularly interacts with others, we're sure you're going to recognize many of the solutions that we present in this series of webinars. Also, if you have a topic that you'd like to suggest to us for an upcoming webinar, please let us know. We'd love to hear that from you as well. Today's topic is engaging employees. The smallest things can make the biggest difference. And to present on this very important topic is Aaron Chappell-Deckert. He is one of the co-owners here at Next Element. Aaron, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Julie. Welcome everyone to this webinar. We did see some familiar faces as you were logging in. It's always great to have some repeat people, and there's some new ones too. So thank you for joining us and taking a little bit of time out of your day. Oh, for the next 25 minutes or so, we will pull apart a little bit about what we mean around engaging employees and give you a very small but powerful behavioral tip that can make a big difference in your workplace relationships. As Julie said, I'm Aaron, one of the co-owners here. I have a background in organization development and have worked with teams and organizations for a number of years. I also have had the pleasure of working with a great team here at Next Element to co-create and design a couple of different curricula we use in leadership development, namely leading out of drama and the compassion mindset. A little bit more about who we are at Next Element. Our main goal is to bring more compassion to every workplace. So that's a part of everything that we do. And we primarily do this in three ways. We provide some customized service and training experiences, either in person or online, virtually. And we also do provide some train the trainer programs where people can become certified to teach and train some of the same tools that we use. And lastly, we have a licensing program too for larger scale organizations, both here in the US and around the world, who would like to use some of our models like the compassion mindset or leading out of drama in a large scale fashion in their organization. We're also distributors of the process communication model. So as we get started today, I wanna make sure we're all here thinking along the same lines about this idea of engaging employees. And I want to clarify that this is a bit different than employee engagement, right? They're certainly related, but why I want to specify this title that we came up with here is to make sure we're all understanding that we're most concerned about leaders and leadership in the workplace and what we can all do to become better leaders. So this is all focused on what you can do to engage your employees. And that's a pretty big difference sometimes from thinking and believing and looking at other people and why they are or are not behaving a certain way. So I want to turn that mirror around so that we can all look in the mirror and say, hey, what can we do differently as the leader here? So to start off, I have a few questions for you, and this is where you can start engaging with Julie a little bit. She may be able to answer some of your questions along the way. If she can't, she'll save them for me and give me a shot at it later to answer those questions. But answer this question yes or no, or sometimes in the chat. Have you ever felt like you were working harder than your employees? To be honest here, sometimes I certainly have felt that way in the past. How about have you wondered what they would do if you weren't around? Are there certain things that just seem like if you weren't talking about it or doing it, it may not happen? Sometimes this is a conversation I have at home, or I should say this is a conversation I get to participate in. So I get it. And I've thought this way about some employees and some teams I've worked with before. How about this one? Have you ever tried to let others know what should happen or what they should do differently and things still didn't turn out the way that you wanted them to? Well, my guess is more than one of you, it's not just me, have said yes to at least one of these questions. And if that's the case, I'm not too surprised. It's a pretty common experience for leaders to experience things like this, especially if you may happen to be relatively new to your role or you've been promoted into a new position. Um, here's something to consider, and this really sets up the framework for this entire discussion today. Before you were a leader, your effectiveness depended on your ability to do your job. And so it was important that we were showing up every day, giving it our best, understanding what we needed to do, being clear about what we were good at, showing our capability, being effective, all of those things that helped us become a good employee. So our effectiveness depended on our own ability to do our job at that point. But now, as a leader, our effectiveness depends on our ability to build others' capability. And that's very different. So we're looking at much more of an interactive approach, pulling on, relying on, and sharing the responsibility for success with a group of people that are working for and with us. And this is a very important, it's a small shift, but it's an important shift in our mindset to go from what we would typically call a rescuer perspective or behavior that is around helping other people by telling them or showing them what to do versus being more of a resourceful leader that is there to help build the capability and support the success of a team of people around them. So as we go forward, kind of keep this distinction in mind, and I'll talk about it a lot. Because our goal really overall in the workplace is to have more happier, productive, and more engaged workplace. And I think that falls on both sides of this equation, whether you're supervisor or employee, where you're owner or an employee. I believe that all of us want to feel more job satisfaction, feel like we're being challenged, and plug into what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. That makes our work life enjoyable. The way we do that here at Next Element is we apply compassion. As I said earlier, this is what we want to see in every workplace. And we have a specific methodology for doing that we call compassionate accountability. And today I'm going to be talking about particularly that bit of resourceful or resourcefulness, which is a part of our compassion accountability methodology. And I'll talk more about that at the end. So our common experience, what are we all experiencing in our job roles as leaders or in our organizations? Many of you who are logging in today are coming from a variety of organizations, a variety of different industries. We've had the pleasure of getting to know and to work with people literally all over the world in just about every industry. And so I know there are a variety of you on this call. And however, what's interesting is that the Gallup organization had a poll fairly recently, I think it's within the last year or 18 months, that showed that employee engagement around the world is actually showing us that employees are about 15% are only actually engaged in their jobs. This is a staggeringly low number in my view. It was surprising when I first read it. However, when I started thinking back on some previous roles that I've had and kind of taking that in holistically, I can see where engagement is very low. And certainly when I walk in to offices here in Kansas or regionally and sometimes in other parts of the world, engagement is a hot topic because we're all looking to get more productivity and more enjoyment and engagement out of work. 15% is pretty low. One important aspect to keep in mind about this that I think is crucial for this conversation is that the Gallup also in their study from, I know this was last year, late in 2019 it came out, that leaders are responsible for 70% of engagement. So we have a pretty significant gap here. As leaders, we are largely responsible. And what they mean in their study is that we are heavily influential in how our employees are engaged at work. And so there's a big gap between this level of responsibility and having only 15% of employees actually engaged at work. So we need to work on filling that gap. And that's where we like to include some skills around compassion. What are we experiencing from this? Well, our common outcome, if you've answered yes to one or two or three of these questions, is over time, what we start to see is a really high level of dependency in the workplace. Dependency on employees, employees being dependent on leaders who are sometimes without even knowing it, are really good at being rescuers, right? I am good at letting you know what you need to do next. I'm good at solving your problem. I have a lot of experience. And so I see what's coming and I tell you how to avoid it. And so we get dependent on each other in not such a great way. And what we start to experience sometimes as a leader is resentment. Why aren't people solving their own problems? Why do they keep coming to me? How come you've worked here for so long and you can't figure this out? We start thinking these things and sometimes verbalizing them as well. And of course, this is going to lead to a lack of initiative on the part of the employees as well. Because if I'm always there to intervene, if you're always there to intervene, then what good is it for me to have to exert the energy to figure things out, right? That's a very boiled down version, but that's at the process level and behavioral level, that's what starts to happen. I'm curious in the chat, do any of you already experience these things? You feel like you experience these things as a leader, or you're hearing some of these things from your people? Just a quick thumbs up or a yes or no in the chat would be great.
We're getting some definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Several yeses.
You know, sometimes what's funny, Julie, some people that we work with will say, oh my gosh, do you have a video recorder in our office or something? Because you know exactly what's going on. And what's interesting is that we're just really good at interpreting behavior, but also it's not so much about us. We ask our clients all the time, and these are the things that they say, regardless of industry and regardless of culture, ethnicity, uh, wherever they are in the world, these are the same things that come up over and over again. So one of the problems here is that as leaders, we have incredibly good intentions. I believe out of all of the people, thousands of people that we've worked with around the world, most of the time, 99% of the time, the leaders we work with around the world have very good intentions. We all want to be helpful. What happens is we're not quite aware of how we're doing this, trying to be helpful, and it leads to unintended consequences, some of which I've mentioned here just a minute ago. And this stems from the fact that we continue to manage tasks instead of managing people. Again, if we're just recently promoted, if we're new to our role, if we're just maybe a younger leader, or we've been promoted above and beyond our capability, which there's a whole principle for that called the Peter Principle, that's what we're talking about here. I'm confident that I got promoted for some good reasons as a young leader. However, I know now that my managing people skills was not what it could have been. I was promoted because I was good at the task that I was doing every day. So what ends up happening is we start working harder. We fall back on our old traditional ways of doing things, which how do we get here? By working hard and by being competent. So we start doing that again and we start overstepping. So how does this happen? Again, sound like a broken record, but this is a big piece I want us to keep in mind here, because it's a attitude shift. It's a mindset shift that is requisite for moving forward as a leader. Before you were a leader, your effectiveness depended on your ability to do your job. And now it depends on your ability to build others' capability. This is something to keep in mind every day and really make that mental shift to how to be more resourceful. So the solution is to go from this more rescuing type behavior where I'm the savior, I bail people out, into more of a collaborative approach where I am offering myself up as a resource, as a support to help us move forward. Okay, so the question is how? What does this sound like? How do we do that? Let me give you some examples so we know what we're talking about here in a little bit more depth. We are talking today about how the smallest thing can make the biggest difference. And here are a few examples of that. We like to drill way down to specific behavior. And our behavior is driven by some of these mindsets that I've already referred to. So first we got to switch our mindset, and then we start looking at new behaviors. Well, the behavior that I want to show you here is from rescuer to what it sounds like to be resourceful. And these are actual phrases or behaviors you might see or experience. So let's look at this one. Rescuer would say, hey, you know what happens when you don't plan ahead, guys, right? Giving this message that you need to figure it out, right? If you figure this out and you plan ahead and you anticipate things, you're going to be just fine, right? But I'm actually not being very supportive here. I'm trying to be, but I'm pulling back a little bit. So what if I were to switch that and I could get curious and say, you know, your last project was excellent. What worked for you last time? And really start leveraging the strengths around me, having them build on success and not just saying, well, you know what will happen. Instead, get our people in front of us to get engaged and to start using their gifts for this is what we hired them for after all. Another rescuer statement or behavior would be something like this. You should use my filing system. It works great. Substitute that for any moment you've had where you have taken what you know to work well and you have given it to somebody else so that they can follow it because you think it's going to help them, right? And you may be exactly right. The difference is they may not have asked for your help. They may not need your help, or they may have a different way of doing it. Maybe it's better, maybe it's faster, maybe it's cheaper, who knows? So how can we change that to get curious and say, how do you keep things organized? Here's another one. A rescuer statement and behavior could be, here is what I do when I'm up against a deadline. So I see my teammate who's struggling. I know they have a lot on their plate, and we have an important deadline this Friday, and I know that they're behind. And so without bothering to get curious about what's going on, connecting with them, I just jump in to try to save the day. And I say, hey, I want to help you out. Here's what I do. Last month when I was up against this, I was in the same position as you. Here's what I do when I get into this kind of trouble. Well, what if instead we said, do you want any help? One of the things you might see in the difference between rescuer and resourceful is that when we're a rescuer, we are assuming a lot of responsibility for the outcome. And when we're resourceful, we're sharing it. We're sharing it because as a leader, I'm here to support you and build your capability. And as an employee, you're here to do the job that we hired you to do. In fact, we spend a lot of time, energy, and money searching, hiring, and training you and we wanted you for your gifts. So there's no need for me to overdo it. If I do that, I'm negating what we hired you for. What's the ultimate goal? Increasing capability of others. Again, not to increase my own ego, to gain power, to control more information, or to get recognition for myself. That's not why we're in this. We're in this to build the capability of others. So the mindset shift needs to change from here, let me show you, to I'm a resource to help you become more capable. When we can start making that mental shift, our behavior will start to follow, and we can practice new strategies for engaging that I've mentioned here already. Why would we want to do this? Well, there's some great benefits. This becoming more resourceful really increases curiosity in the workplace environment. And that is so crucial for people to not walk around thinking they have their mind made up about tasks or about people. When we get curious, we can start to become much more innovative, much more engaged with each other by default. And really, we start to value the capability of others. When we start becoming more resourceful, we start saying in many ways, we value you as a person, we value your capability, and we're going to share in responsibility for moving forward. And we start to leverage the strengths, the very strengths that we were attracted to you, that attracted us to you for hiring you in the first place. It becomes a win-win because then as the leader of a team, an organization, I then get to use my gifts in the best way possible and help you use yours. We get more innovation because now we have more people involved. We have using the strengths of everyone, and we see a much higher potential for change when that happens, and improvement, and better decision making because we have increased buy-in. When we start engaging in this way with our employees, they're naturally going to feel more a part of things because, again, we're saying we value you, you are capable, and you're also responsible to do your job. So it works in a variety of ways. Let's look at just a few more examples to give you a different flavor here. How about this? It will go better next time if you give them a call first. So we have a situation where we've maybe finished a project, let's say, and it didn't quite go as well as we expected it. And so instead of asking you how you're doing with it or what might go better next time, I jump right in if I'm this rescuer leader and I say, you know what, it'll go better next time if you give them a call first. That happened to me before, no big deal. Again, I'm trying to be nice, I'm trying to be helpful. I already know how to fix it, so let me just tell you. Instead, I could say, how would you improve this next time? Let's have people take responsibility for their own experience at work. As a leader, if we are largely responsible or highly influential in engagement, then I think it really comes down to how we choose to do the actual moment of engagement, what we do in that moment of interaction. So if I come at you and I ask you, how would you improve this next time? That sends a completely different message than the first statement. How about next time, just tell them to get back to work? So you're having trouble leading your team. You're maybe new here or new in this department. And so I say, hey, just, tell them to cut it out. Just tell them to get back to work. Same thing. I'm giving you what I think would be a good piece of advice. Instead, saying what worked well with your previous team. Let's figure out what you can do well. What resources do you have at your disposal so you can solve your problem? Because it's not my role to lead your team. And if I were you, ... Pretty much anything that comes after the ... is going to be feeding someone an answer or solving a problem with you or saying, here's what will go better. Instead, what have you tried so far? So how do we be more resourceful? How do we move from rescuer to resourceful? That mindset shift is important first. And then the next thing is get curious. Curiosity is a lost art for leadership. Listen to ideas, ask more open-ended questions, get authentically curious, and give people an opportunity to give some feedback about what's going on. Focus on what has worked well and help others build on that past success. Leverage the diversity of individual strengths that you have around you to get a more fulfilling, more interactive response to problem solving. And lastly, one thing I want to share with you that we'd like to leave you with today is a question that can really change everything when it comes to this leader-employee, engaging employees interaction. So I'm encouraging you to keep this in mind and also find the courage to ask this question from time to time. After an interaction with me, do you feel more or less capable? This is a bit like our litmus test for, are we being rescuer or resourceful? No fancy assessment here. You don't need to go through a lot of training for this. You can just buck up the courage from time to time to get real with your employees and say, hey, I want some feedback. When you engage with me, when we're interacting and we're talking about issues, do you feel more or less capable when we're done? Now, if you're really, really good at rescuing and you've been doing that for years, people aren't going to shoot straight with you first. So give it some time, change your behavior, try to be more resourceful over time, and start asking this question. And then you may get somewhere. You get some good feedback, because as leaders, we don't know what we don't know until we ask. And so it's important as a leader to ask, because very few people are going to give you this type of feedback unless you give them permission to do it. I mentioned compassionate accountability earlier, and I want to bring that up one more time here to let you know that today, when we're talking about compassionate accountability, in this session, we talked a lot about resourceful, and this is all about we are capable when we're talking about resourceful. This is just one aspect of our compassionate accountability methodology. If you happen to be with us last week, I talked about persistent and the difference between struggling against and struggling with people. So this is another piece of the puzzle. And in the past, also on this webinar series, I've talked about openness at least once. And I know Nate Regier has been on here and he's talked about it a couple times as well. So altogether, these form a powerful methodology. And this is a way to really infuse compassion and accountability together into our culture at work. So what's next is really learning how to do more with compassion and accountability. If this is interesting to you and you want to figure out how to put those puzzle pieces together, then I encourage you to look at our Conflict in You course. It's a virtual course, and Julie's going to put that link for you in the chat right now. It's fairly inexpensive. It's quick to take. You can do it in the comfort of your own home or office. With the drama resilience assessment that comes with it and working through the Conflict in You workbook, you have about an hour and a half to 2 of self-study to work through some exercises, self-reflection, and a little activity at the end. And the great part about this is that we're also offering a 1-hour live debrief. It says with the Next Element co-owner, most likely it's going to be me. We have one of those scheduled each week or so for the next several weeks. And we'll go through your own drama resilience scores and debrief that assessment result, and as well as apply compassion accountability, full compassion to a leadership scenario that you want us to cover. That's a lot in a short amount of time. And Julie, I'm wondering if we have any questions.
Not any questions in the chat at the moment, but please feel free to type those in. If something comes to you, type those in and I'll get that to Aaron right away.
Mm-hmm.
I do see a question that came in when somebody registered that I find really interesting. This is similar, Aaron. We were talking before the webinar about the pandemic and how engagement has been influenced by the pandemic that we're all experiencing right now. And someone did ask a question about that. Eager to think more about this in light of the pandemic. We've experienced a coming together as staff since reopening after the stay-at-home order. So how do we nurture that environment now without the threat of death and disease as the motivating factor?
Yeah, what a great question. Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important to think about that, because my view, our view here at Next Element would be, now more than ever, we need more connection. Especially with us being wonderful technology of video technology to be able to connect. However, we need to be much more intentional, much more proactive in this as leaders, and actually reach out. And that's what our compassion accountability methodology is all about. We want to connect on a human level, a relational level first. We also have to get our work done. So how can we connect, and then at Resourceful get curious with some of these questions that I was referring to earlier in this session? And then how can we also hold to our end results and our goals? And I'm going to actually put in the chat here, Julie, my own personal link. Let me get out of this view here real quick, guys, just for a second, and share with you all my link to my calendar. If some of you have bigger questions like this, which are really important, feel free to schedule a call with me. You can look at this Calendly link here, and I've carved out about 30 minutes. We can have a conversation if you have some of these bigger questions. I'd be more than happy to brainstorm how you can work through a certain situation if you'd like. Any other questions, Julie?
Yeah, here's another question from Franz. What if you ask the question about feeling more or less capable, and the other person acts from a victim mindset and feels more capable because you solved their problem by acting as a rescuer?
Fantastic. You have a good grasp on behavior here, Franz. This is such a common thing, right? Because after all, we've set this up. As the rescuing leader, we have set up a dynamic where if I'm the rescuer, then I'm going to solve the problem for you. So therefore, you can play that victim role, and it just keeps reinforcing itself. So this would be a very common response. What would I do without you? Well, I don't know. You helped me out so much. I don't know if I could do this on my own. Those types of things. So very astute, Franz. The response would be coming back with connection and openness, and then getting curious again. And again, that's part of our larger methodology that I'm happy to share with you more about, or you can check out Compassion Accountability course. I'd be happy to, you would learn a lot about there. The short answer would be coming back at open and continuing all around our methodology again and getting curious. Great question.
Is all the questions right now.
There's one more just popped up right as you were talking.
Okay.
As a rescuer, usually I want to start with, if I were you, what is a better way to start a sentence? Absolutely. Great question, Janice. Getting curious means really kind of at least putting part of the responsibility back on the person with which you're speaking, right? So I would usually start with something like, what have you tried so far? Or will you tell me a little bit more about what you've done that's worked and what hasn't worked? Or what ideas do you have? Sometimes the simplest curious question can take the conversation in a very different way. You may still end up arriving at the answer that you already think you have an answer to, but at least we're getting more engagement, and we're getting people to rely on their own ability to think through a problem and use their own skill sets to solve an issue. and you can be supportive in that rather than just give it to them. Hopefully that answers your question. You got it. So I'm noticing it's a little bit afternoon. If there aren't any other questions that come up, I see I've put my calendar link in there for you if you want a conversation. Julie has put in the webinar series link to our webpage, and I think further back, she put in the link to our course. We would love to have you join us. You are most welcome to everybody who's saying thank you. We appreciate you taking the time, 30 minutes. Check back next week. Oh my goodness, can I remember? The difference between or balancing authenticity and agile leadership. I believe that's roughly the name of it. Go check out our webpage. And I believe Nate Regier is back on next Wednesday.
Yes, leadership, authenticity, and agility.
All right.
It's next week.
And help us spread the word. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.